when it comes to our roller, veteran painters like to use rollers more than once. And what you'll see is that after you use them the first time, they're broken in. In fact, if you paint a lot, you break it in before the first use. What I'm doing is simply rolling the fabric on the tape and making any lint that might be on my roller simply come off onto the tape. And as you can see, we caught a few things that are stored on the truck. Here's a 4-inch Purdy. It's a medium stiff paintbrush for all paints and all stains. But if you're going to dip this into paint and start using it, it's a bad idea. What I suggest that you do is you dip it into water up to about here and then shake the water off. Sometimes painters will do this. They'll wrap the paintbrush with tape, and at the end of the day of a long day of painting, I see that their paintbrushes don't get all gunked up paint here. If you want to do that, that's a suggestion I've seen on commercial jobs, and I don't do it. What I'll do is I'll wet the brush up to here, and I'll just make sure that my paint doesn't go all the way up to here. You know, when I see painters with paint all the way up to here, I have to say they're not good painters. It's a sloppy. If you're sloppy with your tool, your main tool, when you're cutting straight lines, if you're sloppy with this thing, you're probably sloppy with your lines. It's just my opinion. Your paintbrush should be clean. The handle should be dry and not have paint all over it. If it does, your hand is going to have paint all over it, and your hand is not going to be able to grip the brush. So you want to be able to put your fingers right around the barrel and onto the bristles at the top without getting paint on it. So this should be your limit with regard to how much paint goes up these bristles. Okay, I'm looking at about 3/4 here. Shouldn't be 7/8 of the distance. It's not a good way to do business. Okay, so we're gonna wet it, shake it off, and that will keep the bristles wet, okay, so that we can clean it easy later on. I also have a specialty roller that I'm going to be using. This is a foam roller. Now, you've seen these in the stores. A lot of new painters like to use them. I don't suggest that you use this on just anything. Take a look at here, this edge here. If you wanted to paint that edge without getting the paint onto this side of it, I'm going to show you what to do. But up on the ceiling, when we get up to that ceiling, I'm going to show you why this would be a good tool to use in order to keep the paint here and not getting it over here or here. Do you see how that action might just keep your paint off of the side? What would this do if you used this? Well, let's look like a microscope. Look what's going on there. You see how you're painting the rim of it, right? Especially when you start doing this. And if you're really careful as a painter and you went like this, great job, but guess what? You're gonna see all the brush strokes. So you would take something like this. You would saturate the roller and then discharge most of it on a wall. And then you come back with a damp roller and lightly rolling back and forth. Now you get the picture, right? You see what's happening there? Do you see that roller going beyond where you want that? You don't, right? Sounds good in theory, right? Let's put it to the test. Now, you really want to get fancy with taking care of your brush? Get yourself a can of satin or gloss, clear urethane. This is wood. Protect the wood. Put a nice coat of paint, of clear on here and even on the barrel. You know what it does? I mean, if you get paint on it, it'll come off more easily. You won't take the clear coat off of the metal if you're gentle with it. And if you're washing it after work, it should come off. Not the worst thing if you don't get it off, but I don't like a messy brush. I don't like it. And I hate when I see painters using a filthy brush. It's just buy a new brush. And the handle, it just helps you keep it clean. Now, I dipped it in the water. Why? Do you see this piece of wood here? Well, this wood goes all the way up to here. And this hair, you ever see a guy wearing hair plugs? I mean, guys, if you're wearing hair plugs, I'm sorry. Everybody can see your hair. You're wearing hair plugs. When you look down this barrel, the ends of these bristles are plugged into holes in this wood. So, if you're going to wet the brush to keep the bristles moist at the top so that your paint doesn't stick to it, you should know that you should not be submerging a paintbrush in water. When I say submerge, I mean going beyond the barrel. Once you go beyond this barrel, what you do is the bristles, first of all, the water can go right up to the wood, but it's unlikely. The gravity is taking the water down and away from the barrel. But underneath this metal barrel, you have wood that can get swollen if you let it get wet. So what happens when wood gets swollen? What holds these bristles in the wood, after the swelling, what happens? The wood swells up and then goes back down and you're left with a space. Eventually these things will fall out. So you should not wet beyond the bristles. You certainly shouldn't be soaking a brush in water or anything else where the water can go up onto this barrel. Now, if you want to get the water, how do you get water out? Do you shake it like crazy? No, you could actually injure your wrist like that if you're a painter. Just right on the tip of your boot, right? Couple of firm taps, and now I have a damp brush and not a soaking wet brush. The fans were too loud in the room, so I did a voiceover. Here's my foam roller. I'm going to discharge the excessive paint, but I'm also mashing that liquid, that paint, toward the center of the roller. You see, remember, it is a sponge of sorts, and so you want the paint to be damp on the surface of the roller, but when you push on it, you want more paint to come out, like a magic marker. Okay, now let's go up to the soffit and paint it. So there's our soffit. This is a tray ceiling, and we have very thick knockdown texture on the ceiling. Not right there on the soffit, but right here we're painting over what's called, as most of you know, an orange peel texture. The ceiling we're going to do with a different applicator. You see that knockdown right there on the white? So you notice how I didn't start on the edge, which is the direction in which I'm now traveling with my roller. And why is that? Because were I to start, you see how I pressed on it like a magic marker and you get more ink out of it? That's what you want to do. You see, if I had started down near the edge, I might be dripping at this point, or even getting it on the white ceiling. You see what I mean by damp? There's not a whole heck of a lot of ink, so to speak, on that roller, is there? That's what I want you to do. Believe me, it takes longer and you might get tempted to put more paint, but you're going to get it on that ceiling if you do that. So don't do that. Now, of course, we're going to give it a second coat, but you see how nice it's starting to look? Look at that. See that? Nice and clean as you're going to get it. Now, to get into the corner where the wall of the soffit meets the ceiling, this is how I apply the paint into that corner. My paintbrush on my painting pole taped to it. There's a tool to avoid the tape, but that's how I do it. You want to preserve your brush with the paint on it. Just put it in plastic like that and push it down against the paint so no air gets in. Now let's put our second coat on. Now if you don't do this right, you're going to have marks all over the place. So you have to be careful about the direction and the proportion of paint that you put on. If you like using a lot of paint, as long as it's not in excess, you have to use the same amount all throughout. The same stroke, the same direction, one way. I'm going back and forth, but I'm going to finish that stroke in one and the same direction. Now, I started painting the ceiling using that 1/2-inch snap lamb roller. It's a very smooth, beautiful roller. Look at the layout of the paint. Isn't that beautiful? Now you see on the edges, to the left of your screen and to the right of your screen, the edges of the ceiling, they're already painted, right? So we already did them with our 4-inch Purdy brush on a pole taped to it. And let's just talk about safety for a moment. Isn't it better to be operating from the ground level as much as possible, right? Now I'm showing you how much paint. I want you to see that I have a substantial amount of paint on that roller. That's why I showed it to you in the video. I want you to know you have to use a lot of paint, but you have to lay out the paint. Now I'm going around that circular obstacle. That penetration, I pull that light down and I'm going around it. Now, that's the second coat that area will get, but we're going to hit it with a third. Why is that? Why would you hit the same area 3 times? Well, the first is to give it the color. The second is to give it a more substantial color. Okay, that's why we do 2 coats, right? And then the reason we're going to give it the third pass, which you'll see in a moment, is to get rid of the alternate direction in which I just rolled the paint. We don't roll in circles. I'm showing you the roller again. Look at the paint. There's that roller's heavy. Now you can see why I'm passing over that circular direction again. You don't want an alternate direction on your wall, your ceiling, or anything. Ideally, you don't even want lights in the way. You want to roll over the light, so to speak. But you see that? You see how close I'm getting to that penetration? I want to get rid of that circular stroke I made on the ceiling. You're going to see it if I don't. And so I rolled over it in the same exact direction in which the entire ceiling is being painted. And that is from the left side of your screen to the right side of your screen. Yes, you see me going back and forth. That's just to mash the paint into the nooks and crannies. But the final roll stroke, the final pull on that roller, look, it's all in the same direction. You see that? Left to right. You see me lift the roller there? That's what you're going to do too. Do not do what so many painters do. One column is rolled down, the next column is rolled up. They don't know what they're doing. They really don't. I can't believe it when I see a painter. See how nice and saturated that is? When I see a painter put his roller on the ground, of course it doesn't have paint on it, but if you're a painter, you don't put your roller on the ground. That has dust on the ground and sediment. Okay, now you see me lifting the roller there? I lifted it. Now I'm going to pull it in the same direction, the finished direction we call it. And that's from, in this case, the left of your screen to the right of your screen. You see I'm lifting that roller. You see when I go back there, I lift it. That's it, folks. Look at the rest of that ceiling. Look how beautiful it's coming out. This is how you do it. Now, anybody watching this video who can hold a roller on a pole can do this. It might be heavy for those who can't sustain the weight of that. That gets heavy when you're... I had an 18-inch roller on this job. I didn't use it because it gets heavy and you want to keep the same pressure and the same amount of paint. Okay, you see me lifting that roller to go in that direction? See it's lifted there? Nice. Now, what you can see in this video is the pressure I'm using on the roller. Okay, that's important too. The arm of that roller, the metal, see that metal there that's holding the roller? If you don't take care not to put excessive force on that roller, one of the sides of the roller will have more paint than the other. So you have to adjust. It's like an airplane pilot. If one of the engine goes out, he has to drop the rudder on one side and the engine is working on the other side. You know what I mean? Well, if you roll paint and you're using your roller in a certain direction, you have to take into account that metal arm on the roller will push an excessive amount of paint onto your ceiling if you put an excessive amount of pressure on the arm, or the elbow, you could call it, of that roller cage. Ideally, a roller cage should have 2 arms or 2 elbows coming from the pole holding on to the roller, right? You see only one there, right? Why is that? Well, money and weight. And so they only have one, but you're the painter. You have to compensate for the amount of pressure that you apply on that roller. If you don't, you will have a disproportionate amount of paint that comes out on one side. And that will be on the side where the arm is, simply because the roller is receiving the pressure from your arm against that ceiling. Did you ever mash potatoes? My mother had 8 kids, and she would mash potatoes before my family got our hands on an electric beater. And so there's mashers. And I remember the tool having 2 arms and not one. Can you imagine mashing potatoes in a big saucepan with a tool to mash the potatoes that only had 1 arm connected to the gadget that mashes the potatoes? Could you imagine how easily that would get bent eventually, taking all that pressure? The same idea applies to this tool. So if you are rolling your paint and you say, Spencer, I don't know what I did. I did what you showed me to do. Well, you have to take into account that which you cannot see in this video, and that is the manipulation of the roller with your strong hand, adjusting the pressure that goes into the roller as you're using it. And that is why I make this long statement about it, because you could still mess this up. You see that arm? You see that it's only one side, right? You can still mess this up if you don't apply the right pressure. Let's face it. If you applied the same pressure on that roller, the roller would receive the pressure of your arm on one side, the side that has that arm, more so than it would on the other. So you see how my left hand was just holding that? I was doing that so that I could adjust my pressure. You see, I twist the roller with my strong hand so that my roller lays on that ceiling all at the same amount of pressure. Look at the results, folks. What a beautiful ceiling. It's still a little wet, as you can see. Enjoy. Leave me a comment or a question if you need to. Thanks for watching.